Hey, what's up, folks? It's Will here once again. I'm going to do something a little bit different here because we're coming off a UFC 205, the presser last night, and it was absolutely incredible. Just the thought of the UFC heading to New York is incredible, but the card they've put together for UFC 205 is just unbelievable when you look at it. I'm looking at it right now, and it's just an unbelievable card. I'm just going to give you some of my thoughts on some of the matchups that have been made, just how this is really what UFC 200 really should have looked like, with having the biggest star in the sport topping the bill, having up and coming champions in there. You've got hometown guys. You've just got great fights right throughout the fight card, and I'm just going to give my thoughts on it for about 5-10 minutes, maybe a wee bit longer, on just how incredible the card is. We'll start with the presser last night. I mean, Conor McGregor show, you really, once you put Conor in those situations, he really doesn't kind of verbally lose to anybody, and he's just the biggest star in the sport, and the fans in New York are 100% on his side for this fight here. I think that was clear as day last night. When that fight comes around on November 12th, they're going to be firmly in Conor McGregor's side here. A lot of Irish Americans in New York. I've seen the UFC 205 tickets just went on sale. I'm seeing a lot of people struggling to get tickets, which is something that's really kind of crept up recently with the UFC. I struggled to get tickets for UFC 204, and it's a lot of touts and scalpers were buying those tickets. I can only imagine what UFC 205 was like. Still seeing some of my friends are getting some tickets, which is great, but it's a shame that probably some real fans are going to miss out on this huge card here in New York. But I mean, just the presser last night, it was just, from the way they started it, raising the curtain, I thought was awesome. And you're having all the fighters there, listed champions, number one contenders. It was just phenomenal to see. And I mean, Conor McGregor really just stole the show with everything. I thought he got off to a very fast start, kind of putting Eddie Alvarez in his place regarding his money, which he always comes out with. Personally, I thought Eddie did well for himself kind of in that one. He never really seemed to back down too much, and Conor never really got into his head on a whole lot of things. And then, I mean, it was just everything. And then that guy asked the question about who up there on stage you think would give you the toughest fight, and then Jeremy Stephens. Why the hell Jeremy Stephens decided to open his mouth, and he just should have stayed quiet. And within 2 seconds, it was actually quite cool to see somebody speaking up, because before nobody really speaks up at that. But why he opened his mouth, I have no idea. Within 2 seconds, Conor McGregor buried him 6 feet deep where he was sitting down pretty much, and put him in his place. And what was even funny was that he come back with the old leprechaun, and then, oh, good one. I was in bits last night about midnight watching that, and just really, really funny. But overall, I mean, I'm just looking at the fight card here, and it's only 6 weeks away, which people need to realise as well. It's not that far away from this weekend. It's going to be 6 weeks. And if this card stays intact, it will be the biggest and best card in UFC history, without a doubt. Like I said before, this should have been UFC 200. Starting off, the first few fights are they're not too great. I'm guessing these 4 fights will be on UFC Fight Pass. It wouldn't surprise me if the UFC go with a 6-fight main card here, with the quality of fights that they have on show here. And they maybe, Carmouche and Caitlin Chukagian will definitely be on Fight Pass. Lyman Good, Bilal Muhammad. Really happy to see Bilal on there once again. I'm a fan of this guy. Nice to see him getting a quick turnaround again and getting on a huge fight card. Jim Miller getting another huge showcase fight on a big card like he did at UFC 200, where he'll face off with Thiago Alves. It wouldn't surprise me if that's the UFC Fight Pass prelim kind of headliner. Tim Boetsch versus Rafael Natal. Yeah, Rafael Natal. I think I've got a funny feeling those 4 will definitely be in Fight Pass. I definitely think that'll happen. Then you move on to the prelims, and if they do the normal, the 5 cards on the main card, or the 5 fights on the main card, or the 6, this prelims is going to be unbelievable. There's champions, current champions who've just lost their belt are going to be on here. If this is the way it's going to stay, it might change up a little bit. Misha Tate against Raquel Pennington. Really fun looking fight, big fight for both girls. Raquel looking to move up into that elite of the division. Misha Tate's always been up there. She has to prove herself after that demolition job that Amanda Nunes did on her. That's a great fight. If that's going to kick off the prelims, that's a great fight. Then we have a little bit of kind of intriguing fight. Tim Kennedy coming back. We haven't seen this guy in a few years, and he's against Sugar Rashad Evans, who is dropping down to the middleweight division. Now this is a former UFC heavyweight contender. I mean, he fought in Tough and fought up there, and then he moved down to 205. The knockout that shocked the world when he knocked out Chuck Liddell down there. So he's a former champion, and he's making that cut very late in his career down to 185. It's interesting to see how that is going to affect him. Frankie Edgar versus Jeremy Stephens. Great fight. A lot on the line here for Frankie Edgar if he wants to keep himself really relevant in that 145 division. And Jeremy Stephens is no pushover for any guy in that division. He showed that against Henan Barrow, another former champion. Big guy, hits hard. And I think he could pose Frankie Edgar a lot of problems in that fight. But you've got to take into consideration the guys like Frankie's from Jersey. They're pretty much fighting at home in this one. And that's going to be a big thing for the local guys. They've waited a long time for these cards, especially Frankie. I think he was fighting like fights in 2005 when there was no rules. There was headbutting, there was like silly rules and stuff. So, but that's a tough fight. I mean, right now, sitting here talking to you guys and whoever's watching out there, I'm liking Jeremy Stephens, man. If he performs like he did against Henan Barrow and maybe lifts it a little bit, I think he's got a chance that he could knock out Frankie Edgar. He could get a big decision win there. Tough fight. Another fight that got added late last night was Khabib Nurmagomedov against Michael Johnson. I actually feel pretty bad for Khabib Nurmagomedov because he deserves this title shot 100%. He's undefeated in MMA, undefeated in his UFC tenure. We haven't seen too much of him in the last few years. His only win in the last couple of years is against Darrell Horcher. And he's facing Michael Johnson, who's coming off his biggest win of his career against Michael Johnson, Dustin Poirier, when he starched him inside about a minute and a half with a beautiful 1-2 combination and just put out Poirier's lights. I didn't see that coming personally. I knew he had the skills to do it. I thought Poirier was on the rise and was looking really good. If that is your premier fight on the prelims, that's a great fight. And potentially the next challenger to the £155 champion, whoever that may be, Alvarez or McGregor. So if we're moving into a five fight main card, we're starting off with Donald Cerrone against Kelvin Gastelum. A fight I was just think Robbie Lawler could have been on this card. I mean, holy shit, if Robbie Lawler was on this card against Donald Cerrone, Gastelum's not a bad replacement. I'm not as hyped about the fight as I was with Robbie Lawler, which is pretty obvious. But Gastelum's an up-and-coming guy. He's making his way slowly up to the top of that £170 weight division. That's going to be a really interesting fight. I'm not sure where to go in there. Cerrone has never looked as good as he has in the UFC as he is now. That finish of Rick Story was incredible. Chris Weidman versus Yoel Romero. I'm a fan of Yoel Romero. I like the way he fights. I don't like some of the kind of awkward stuff that he does, sitting on the stool and just certain other things. But Chris Weidman fighting at home here at the New Yorker on this card. I must admit, I think it's going to be hard picking against Chris Weidman, but he's had some serious injuries in that time, and Yoel Romero is a machine, a physical machine, and could cause Chris Weidman a lot of problems. Joanna Jędrzejczyk against Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I'm a huge fan of both girls, but I do believe that Karolina is over her head here. I think that Joanna's too accurate. I think she's going to be the faster fighter. She's going to be the bigger fighter. she's the one with the champion. She's had that title. She's had those big fights. She came off hard fights. That fight with Gadelia was a tough one. Carlene, on the other hand, she beat Rose Namajunas, who is definitely in the top 5 in that division, in my opinion. Great fight. But you have to edge Double J in that one. Tyron Woodley against Stephen Thompson. If you told me 6 months ago that Tyron Woodley would be the champion, I would have laughed in your face. And because I just didn't see it. I honestly didn't see it happening. And my boy Mike Rhodes was telling people, Tyron's going to do this, Tyron's going to do this. And he went out and starched Robbie Lawler without even getting hit. But he's got the kind of worst stylistic matchup for this fight in Stephen Thompson. I think Stephen Thompson's, he's not going to, not unless he lands something big, I think he could be in trouble very, very quickly against Wonderboy with the angles that he cuts, his foot speed, his hand speed, his angles, his the way he pivots into his shots and he turns his kind of legs and he punches into things. He can really hurt you down there, hurt you anywhere. But I'm not going to rule out Tyron Woodley because he showed in the big fight that he can pull something out and shock the world, because he did that with Robbie Lawler. I didn't see a hell of a lot of people picking Tyron Woodley, and he could do this here on the biggest stage of his career without a doubt, being on this card, because this is going to break the UFC pay-per-view record. I think this is going to easily hit over 2 million buys. I've just got that feeling that this card, if it stays intact the way it is going to really be the biggest card. And with McGregor, everything always goes up with this guy. So, and then we've got the main event. We've got Eddie Alvarez, former Bellator champ, coming off career performance against Rafael dos Anjos. Conor McGregor, just the biggest name in the sport. The guy who's pretty much changed the sport for himself. Hopefully the trickle-down effect will start to affect these guys and they'll start to get more money, because I think that's what needs to happen. More of these guys need to get more money because McGregor is rolling in it and there's other guys who are not. I've always been one of these guys who I really think that the lower people, that I think they start off like 10 and 10, 12 and 12, they could raise all that. Instead of giving McGregor, I know McGregor is worth the money and he brings in the money. I really hope some of the people lower down the card that are on smaller contracts really get a lift on this and just get a pay rise or something, because they deserve it. But they don't do as much as what Conor McGregor does. So the money that he earns is he's entitled to it pretty much. In this fight, I'm seeing a lot of people counting out Eddie Alvarez in this fight, and that's something that I will not do, because he showed, people were counting him out. I'd never seen that many people picking picking Alvarez against Dos Anjos, and I was one of them. I thought Dos Anjos, he just looked phenomenal against Cerrone. I thought he's going to handle Alvarez in this one. He's really good everywhere, and he's just going to handle Alvarez. And Alvarez came out like the old dogged Eddie Alvarez and just threw shots. And once he hit him once, good night, it was over, and he stopped Dos Anjos in the first round. But what Eddie Alvarez are we going to see? That's the thing here. Are we going to see, if he comes out the way he did against Dos Anjos and kind of throws a little bit wildly, Eddie Alvarez is very, very hittable. Very hittable. I watched a couple of his fights after I've not long finished work. I came home and watched a couple of fights. Recently he's been a little bit more kind of technical and he doesn't get hit as much, but he gets hit a lot, and I don't care what anybody says, McGregor is one of the biggest power hitters in MMA. I've had numerous conversations and arguments with people, and disagreements more than anything. McGregor is one of the biggest hitters in the MMA period, and just if he lands something once, I think Eddie Alvarez is going to be in for a tough night. But I think Eddie Alvarez has to do what he did against Anthony Pettis and just make it dirty and put him against the cage and let McGregor try and do something, try and get back to his feet, try and get out of that position. That's the way I think Eddie Alvarez is going to approach this fight. I don't see him come out there wanting to go blow for blow with McGregor, because I think McGregor will knock him out. The left hand is too much, his kicks are too much. That's something that we still haven't seen in the UFC. I think he uses those kicks to mask that left hand. I think it's a fight that he could use those kicks to the body we may see a little bit more of that like we have in the past. Eddie Alvarez's clear goal to win this fight is putting him against the cage, taking him down, grinding him, looking for submissions, looking for attacks down on the ground, maybe finishing by TKO. McGregor's really hard to beat, knockout, and I mean, I think I have to right now. I was speaking with people on Twitter the other day there, and I was actually in my mind I was thinking I'm favouring Alvarez here, but after watching some of Eddie's fights and seeing how hittable he can be, I have to favour Conor, and in this one. And I know I am a fan of Conor McGregor. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to deny it. And I got called out in that last time when I picked him against Nate Diaz, but I thought that he was going to beat Nate Diaz, and he went and beat Nate Diaz again. So I'm edging Conor McGregor right now, but there's a lot of stuff that's probably going to go down in the next 6 weeks between these two into fight week. But that's just a couple of my initial thoughts on UFC 205. What are your thoughts on the card? And who do you think is going to win the main event? Do you think Eddie Alvarez is going to retain? Do you think Conor McGregor is going to be the 2-weight world champion and have the featherweight belt and the lightweight belt? Let me know down below. And this is just me talking about how great this card is. I can't wait for this card. We've got a lot of filler cards in between then, now and then. I've got 204 next week, which I'll be out there for. But when you look at a pay-per-view card, 204 to 205, I mean, down here at the moon there. So crazy. Come follow me on Twitter, WillMartin7MMA, if you ever want to talk anything about MMA, and let me know your thoughts for this card here. Take care, and I will see you all for the UFC 204 predictions.